Hey, what's up, everybody? My name's Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today, in this Faceplant Chronicles thing, I want to talk less so about making the dopest sound ever and more so talking about something that I've been discussing with Zayaku, which is the concept of turning a sound into something that feels more like an instrument and less of just a synth. So, let me explain. First of all, if I have just a single sound and it does this, the sound is relatively dead, right? It's going to be the exact same every time I play it. And sometimes that can be kind of cool if you're just doing like a bass or whatever. But what we're trying to discuss is this balance behind making something have a certain amount of parameters and control to where you can express more of the sound and ways to do that or strategies behind that, but also create something that still feels like it's alive, you know? If I play my guitar, there's so many different accents and inflections that I can create based off of like how I play it, which is the beautiful thing about instruments. Even as I speak, I can say, what in so many intonations that make my voice sound like an instrument, right? There's so much room for expressions. How many different ways can you say what? 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 Just to name a few. And so, what we want to think about whenever we're creating instruments or patches rather, is what can we do to that? How can we utilize that? And how can we do it in a way that is going to implement some aspect of control? So, we're going to explore a little bit. I don't have anything specific planned, but the key concept is movement, and that's with any sound. But we don't necessarily want to go so far with movement as in creating something that is like, how do you say, random, which we could, and we can resample stuff and pull it out or whatever. But I'm more so trying to create something that is actually going to have a little bit more energy, a little bit more um, intention, if you will. And we're going to be utilizing a couple of tools in which to do that. So let me just build something very simple. Let's start with something that would be phrased as a very typical bass. And what I'm going to do is utilize an envelope, because we can go from something like this to something like this to something like this, right? That's like totally the party boy. Uh, dum, 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 dum. Yeah. Anyways, this is a great starting point because we have something that has an inflection on here that can be controlled and can be manipulated. So one thing that we can think about with just a very simple parameter is utilizing something like velocity. Um, when it comes into bass, I generally don't mess with velocity in terms of volume or gain. And the reason why is because I want it to be relatively consistent, and sometimes it can become a mixed nightmare if you've got different levels of bass and stuff. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, but something that we can do more creatively with the velocity perhaps is mess with the decay. So maybe if I hit this harder, the decay of this is going to be much faster. I don't actually have anything that I can utilize with this, but what we can do is create a note here, which I have stuff, it's just not plugged in. But if I were to create a note, say on like F0, then what I can do with this is mess around with the velocity here to change how this is expressed. So, and so what's really cool about that is, like, let's say we did something kind of funky. Um, Maybe something kind of like that. So let's go ahead and move it and give it a little bit of swing or a little bit of movement here. There we go. You got to add the funk, right? So now that we have something like this, what we can do very easily with this is we can make this intentional if we want to. But something else that we can consider is just highlighting all of this. And I'm just going to hit Control A. And then what we can do is go over to the velocity if you're within Bitwig and do something kind of like this. And the reason why I like doing it this way is because even though I just randomized it, it's going to be consistent with how I adjusted it. Whereas if I were to just use randomization on the velocity here, it might not be. Something that you can do is apply an LFO to this to where you turn off the retriggering. So I think that's kind of important as well if you want to do it that way, but you can create something kind of like this. Big middle finger. I'm sorry, I didn't do that on purpose. But you can set this to be kind of slow and right click, turn this off and go never retrigger to where you can adjust the velocity to go down, kind of like this. I'm going to turn this off. I just wanted to show you that in case if you wanted to do things that way. But if we listen to this, take a listen to how this is going to become a little bit more alive now. And what's kind of cool about that is we can also make this more dramatic. So I'm going to make this wide and turn the chaos up a little bit more. And now we're going to have a lot of different sound or a lot of different expressions of this. Now, something else that you might want to consider is we can use a little bit of randomization on this in order to give this just a bit of variation, but in very subtle ways. And this was something that I picked up from one of my viewers, which I think was a great idea. But now that we have that, we can start to mess with this. And now it's going to be a little bit random, but it's going to change the overall sound whenever we express something like that. Now, what if we took that same idea and we started to apply that to something like this? Actually, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use something like a note here. And what this is going to do is as this plays higher in the frequency range, that's going to change the detuning. So we want to set this to maybe F0 or F1. And then we can set this to 24. And now whenever we play this, again, when we play a higher note, it's going to detune this. Which pretty cool. We can also utilize this to set a couple of different things as well. For example, if we have this on a delay, we don't want to do a long delay, so we want to reduce the feedback or whatever, but we can change this to adjust the mix here and turn the ducking on. Cool. Now what we can get into is maybe something that's going to give us a little bit more. So this is where stuff like MPE can really help things come alive. So for example, if we utilize the pressure here, which if I had an MPE device, it's not plugged in, but just take my word for it. But if I were to apply something that would be like utilizing FM, then what we can do is start to change the pressure of this in order to create something. And I don't really necessarily want this to become an MPE tutorial because a lot of the features that I've just described don't necessarily fall into the categories of strictly MPE. But what we want to do is think about creating something that makes it feel more alive, something that makes it seem like whenever I play stuff on here, it's going to give me something that actually is expressive, something that's going to give me a little bit more to work with. And I think that it's important to do it on this level first, because imagine what this would be like if I actually applied it to a neuro bass. And that's kind of the direction that I'm going to be heading in. If you all know, like, I've got a lot of presets and stuff available on my website that's like the craziest sounds or whatever, that's all randomized and stuff. But the way that my mind is working lately is I want to create specialized sounds and specialized things that are going to be high quality but controllable, whatever that means. And so, because of that, maybe something that we can utilize are different phrases or different things that we can change the shape of. So, right now, for example, we have everything set as an LFO, sorry, as an envelope, but who's to say that if I adjust the pressure or I adjust the slide or whatever, it changes the shape of. Let's go ahead and do that here in just a second. And I think that could be kind of cool. But right now we're adjusting the pressure FM. And so the more pressure that we apply, the more that it's going to introduce this FM towards the sound up to a certain extent. So now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to do it this way as well. But let's go ahead and go to, is this the pressure? Timbre, pressure. Yeah. So what we can do is we can kind of take the same thing with all this and the pressure, and we can just randomize this and see. I need to go Control A and then do the same thing with the pressure here and start to apply this and see if I can create something that is more expressive in this way. And this isn't a bad way to do it. And it really is trying to think about taking advantage of the MPE capabilities that Bitwig offers in the first place, as well as stuff like Phaseplant. But this doesn't have to be done through MPE. This can easily be done through macro and automation. So don't think that, let's say you're on, I don't know, Ableton Live 9. I know some people, wink, wink. You should still kind of approach it of being like, hey, this is just data placement and values, right? But we're trying to find a way that we can set up values to where maybe we're not doing it with MPE, but we're doing it with macros or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's just that MPE is a little bit easier to work with. But let's go ahead and mess with this and see what that sounds like. Let's maybe try reverb. And before you all start yelling at me in the comment section about being like, mono your bass, like this is just for experimentation. So I know, but let's leave it alone. So yeah, excuse me, you can do stuff like that, which is kind of cool. Now, if we talk about slide, maybe what we can do is think about, yeah, okay, so let's do that. So what I'm going to do is we are going to create an LFO table, and I am going to apply this here, kind of like so. And what I'm going to do though is I'm going to move this down to 0, and we can take a slide here, wherever that is, pressure, velocity, timbre, I think is what that is labeled as, and utilize this to open this up and create a movement now. I do kind of want there to be something that we can change this, so maybe we can do this with a macro or whatever. And now we're kind of thinking of things on 2 hands as opposed to 1, say if we're going to create something as an instrument. But that's kind of the fun of this, right? Is that I'm trying to think about if I were like going to perform this sound and utilize it in a way to where I'm playing keys and stuff on, say, an Embodme array or a Rolly Seaboard or whatever kind of MPE, Osmos, whatever. How can I create something that somebody is going to want to interact with? And so on the macro here that we have, we can utilize this to change the shape, and then we can change the MPE timbre of this in order to start messing with the LFO. So what I'm going to do here is, in order to give me something to work with, I'm going to give myself just a little bit different of a response here. So that way this sound right here is going to be held. And what we can do with that is activate this at 100% and then have some other things here, like the rest of this stuff that is going to kind of just be off kilter to give us a little bit more movement. The reason why I want to do this is because I want to showcase the macro, which I'll talk about here in a second. But if we take that to the timbre and then we add that chaos, then we're going to make this seem like it's a little bit more alive together again in the first place. So, and again, this is supposed to be just a demonstration. This isn't supposed to be how to make the craziest sound, but it's understanding the concept of how do we turn something into an instrument and really make the most out of what it is that we're doing, and how do we create it in a way that's going to be playable, not just how crazy can we make the sound. I've already kind of gone down that route with Eternum 3, and now I'm a little bit more of like, how do we refine this into something that we can actually use, if that makes sense. So let's listen to this now. Sick. So what we can do with this is change that. Now, I'm not really sure. Is there a macro on here or something that... Yeah, there is. Okay. So that's just from my default thing. But what we're going to do is make sure that all of these are off. Let me just turn them off here, because what seems to be going on with this... I'm going to turn this off as well, because the template that I normally have is that these are set to macros, which normally change that, but I want to make sure that I can play this by hand. But now that we have that, let's just kind of listen to this and see how we can kind of perform that last note. So maybe right here, we can take this and utilize that right here with a little bit of automation. And then finally, we can do something super generic, like grab the mod wheel here and apply, something kind of like this, where we've got a little bit of vibrato, vibrato, and we can make this go at a pretty fast rate, kind of like this. So that way, whenever we play the mod wheel, now we've got something that's a little bit more usable. So yeah. And now that we have something like this, it feels like we can actually play this and use this for, I don't know, like a glitch hop track or something. Maybe we can add some distortion to this. This is probably going to be too much, but whatever. We can add some clipping to this again, and let's just listen to how this funky bass line sounds. So yeah. Okay, so what am I playing? Am I playing F? Yeah, sorry. So okay. So we can kind of... maybe make that a little bit earlier. So do 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 do. And then we can adjust this as well and make changes to this both via the timbre and all that other stuff. So let's go ahead and change the pressure. Okay, so with this, I actually don't want that until we get to the second part. But as you can see, just from creating something like that, I have made quite an expressive instrument that sounds different. It doesn't sound like it's being played at the exact same phrasing at all times. And there's some value within that because it didn't take too long. And while I wouldn't necessarily make a song like this, that's like, I'm not really like a funky bass kind of person. It doesn't mean that I don't know how to do it, but what's more important is understanding how we've created a interesting instrument that, yeah, feels like it's more alive, I guess. And there's more ways to do this, but this is just a single example about how we can manipulate something like this. Maybe we can do. And then maybe we can change this up. And then right there we can add that do 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 do. And then maybe something that I can do is move this over here. We can take out that bottom note because I don't. And then make this just a little bit later. Make everything here just a tad bit pushed over to the right. Just a bit. So something else that we can consider is maybe even doing something else like adding an octave and pushing this down to 0. And then maybe with this note, we can adjust this to say 50%. Make this like 7, make it really wide and see what we can do with that. But maybe what we might want to try to implement is a high pass filter. But you see what I'm saying? Like now I'm starting to get these gears turning to where I'm trying to make different stuff pull up here. Maybe, excuse me, maybe something else that we can do is adjust the macro of this one, and we can change that to a different shape here. So I don't know what that's going to sound like, but yeah, you know, or see, now we've created this stuff that has this movement on here that I think that as opposed to doing all this by hand, in theory has made this process like 50 times easier, right? Now the only trick is to modify this and to think about how we can change this into something that would be more so of a neuro bass, because while this is a funky bass and all that, this feels more of something that would be from an old classic synthesizer as opposed to like really cool phrasing and like deep and dark aesthetics of like right, which is already hard enough to pull off. But I still think that this is the entry point to building an instrument like that, and it's something that I'm interested in cultivating. And maybe finding a middle ground in between, you know? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, something that I could do is just like slap a multipass on here and adjust the macros here to apply to all that stuff, which, yeah, why not? Let's say I wanted this to be different, or let's say I wanted all of this to be the same. This is just going to be like maybe the last thing that I try, but now you can see that I've turned all the modulation off on this and all of the macros are free. But maybe what I can do is take these macros here that I've done and apply them to each thing respectively. To the velocity goes here, the pressure goes here, timbre goes here, whatever. Hey, there we go. And then now we've got three different things that we can try to utilize to see if that's going to do something interesting or not. So one final thing that I'll add to this is my final neurochain, which is what I do on all this stuff because we're starting to introduce like some stereo things now or whatever. But yeah, I can kind of just pull up a preset and just 2 clicks and it's perfect. No, I'm just kidding. But I do have a bunch of filters kind of like so that I can utilize to try to see if this is going to do something cool or not. This might be really loud, but let's give it a shot and see what it sounds like. And then you be the judge. In some cases it works for some hits, and so maybe we can do a mix of that or something in between. But yeah, it's something to consider. So with that out of the way, thank you all so much. I appreciate you hanging with me for this. If you are interested in my sounds, I offer them on alchemy.com, especially for phase plant, but I also have things like this on Bitwig, Ableton, Current. I have a free pack available for Vital, although it's not quite this in depth. Or if you want to go further into this, you can always book a lesson with me. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to give some insight into where my head is at with sound design. Or this is just one aspect that I'd like to explore as a means of execution and making more usable instruments, if you will. I'm not saying that this is the answer, but it's something to think about. And if anybody has anything else that you would like to include within this to kind of figure out how to make this work and how to actually create something that you just don't have to work so hard for, that's my goal for you. Is I want to go through and I'm going to do all the hard work to create instruments that are going to be easier for you to implement and actually make songs with, because that's something that I've always struggled with. And that's my intent and that's my philosophy. So in any case, thank you all so much. I appreciate you hanging out with me while I figure this out. And I don't know, leave me a comment, like the video, and let me know what your thoughts are. Bye, everybody.